Ladies and gentlemen, gather round for a tale as old as time, or at least as old as that stain on your husband's favorite t-shirt. Today, we're going to explore the mysterious creature known as the 5-years-old man. You see, while your man might look like an adult on the outside, there's a good chance he's operating with the emotional software of a kindergartner on the inside. Don't believe me? Picture this. Little Timmy is playing in the sandbox. He's built an awesome sandcastle and he's feeling pretty darn proud of himself. Then along comes Sally, who accidentally knocks it over. What does Timmy do? He yells, "You ruined it," throws sand and runs away crying. Now, fast forward 30 years. Big Tim is at work. He's just finished a big project and he's feeling pretty darn proud of himself. Then along comes Sally from accounting, who points out a small error. What does Tim do? He snaps, "You don't appreciate my work," slams his office door, and sulks for the rest of the day. See the parallel? That's the 5-years-old man in action. But why does this happen? Well, remember how we talked about those old thought patterns that get stuck in our heads? For many men, a lot of those patterns got set before age 5. It's a crucial time when little boys are starting to try figuring out how to be men. They learn things like, big boys don't cry, you have to be the best, never show weakness, feelings are for sissies. Fast forward a few decades, and you've got grown men still operating on these kindergarten rules. It's like they're walking around with a tiny, emotional 5-year-old at the controls inside their head. This explains so much about the puzzling behaviors of the 5-years-old man, doesn't it? Suddenly, all those baffling male quirks start to make sense. I'm sure you can think of a few, but here are some of the most common ones. Take, for instance, his inability to handle criticism. In his 5-year-old mind, any suggestion that he's not perfect is a catastrophic blow to his self-worth. There's no sense of proportion and no capacity to even look into self-responsibility. It's as if, by pointing out that he missed a spot while mowing the lawn, you've accused him of being a failure at life. In his world, there's no middle ground between best and worst. Then there's the classic shutdown during arguments. It's not just a simple case of clamming up or zoning out. No, this shutdown is far more insidious and damaging. When the 5-years-old man shuts down, he's not just avoiding the conversation, he's actively retreating into a fortress of resentment. On the surface, you might see a blank stare or a sudden fascination with his phone, but inside, it's a whole different story. He's sulking, yes, but he's also festering. His mind becomes a breeding ground for nasty thoughts, all directed at you, the person who's actually trying to solve the situation. This shutdown isn't about big boys don't cry. It's about a profound lack of emotional intelligence and unhealed attachment patterns. It's as if his emotional development hit a roadblock somewhere in early childhood, and he never learned how to navigate complex feelings or conflicts in a healthy way. In these moments, he's not protecting himself from vulnerability. He's protecting his fragile ego from the perceived threat of being wrong or having to change. His 5-year-old psyche equates compromise or admission of fault with total defeat. Lastly, let's not forget the infamous man tantrums. When all else fails, he resorts to slamming doors, sulking, or giving you the silent treatment. It's like watching a toddler's meltdown, just with more facial hair and a deeper voice. Understanding these behaviors doesn't excuse them, but it does shed light on why your supposedly grown man sometimes acts like he's fresh out of kindergarten. It's a reminder that beneath that adult exterior, there's often a little boy still trying to figure out this whole growing up thing. And let's be honest, aren't we all sometimes? It's like watching a toddler's emotions play out in dad body form. Hilarious if it weren't so frustrating. But here's the kicker. Most men aren't even aware this is happening. They're so identified with these thought patterns that they think it's just who they are. They're stuck in a sandbox time warp and they don't even know it. Now, let's talk about something that really makes the 5-years-old man tick: habit and fuel. These are the secret ingredients that keep his inner kindergartner alive and kicking well into his adult years. First, let's tackle habit. You know how they say old habits die hard? Well, for the 5-years-old man, these habits aren't just old. They're practically fossilized. We're talking about behaviors that have been reinforced daily for decades. These aren't just habits, they're deeply ingrained patterns of being. Think about it. Our man has been throwing mini tantrums, avoiding vulnerability, and competing over everything since he was actually 5. That's years and years of practice. He's not just good at these behaviors, he's a virtuoso. But here's where it gets really interesting. These habits aren't just automatic responses anymore. They've become comfortable, familiar, even necessary. Which brings us to fuel. Fuel is all about how the 5-year-old man subconsciously sets up his daily life to provide opportunities for these childish behaviors. It's like he's an emotional arsonist, constantly laying the groundwork for his next tantrum fire. Let's break it down. 1. The criticism seeker. He might claim to hate criticism, but watch closely. He'll often put himself in situations where he's likely to be critiqued. Why? Because that criticism gives him the perfect excuse to act out his "I'm not good enough" script, which of course he will project on you. It's perversely comforting because it's familiar. 2. The conflict creator. Notice how he seems to pick fights over the smallest things? That's not an accident. He's creating opportunities to shut down emotionally because that's his comfort zone. It's easier than actually dealing with feelings like anger and grief. 3. The tantrum architect. He might seem surprised when he explodes, but look closer. He's often been building up to that moment all day or all week, collecting small annoyances like kindling for his eventual emotional bonfire. This is where habit and fuel create a vicious cycle. The habits demand fuel, so he creates situations that provide that fuel, which in turn reinforces the habits. It's a self-perpetuating system of emotional immaturity. The tricky part is, he's usually not aware he's doing this. Remember, these patterns are so ingrained that they feel like an essential part of who he is. The idea of not acting this way doesn't just seem difficult, it seems impossible, even terrifying. So what's the way out of this cycle? Awareness is the first step. Recognizing these patterns for what they are, learned behaviors, not innate traits, opens the door to change. It's about realizing that these habits, while comfortable, aren't serving him or anyone around him well. The next step is to start interrupting the cycle. This means catching himself in the act of setting up these situations. It's about pausing before reacting and asking, is this really how I want to handle this? Or am I just playing out an old script? But here's the rub. This interruption is monumentally difficult because the 5-year-old man is convinced he's absolutely right. His entitlement is not just a preference, it's a core belief. In his mind, he's not throwing a tantrum. He's righteously defending himself against an unjust world. He's not avoiding vulnerability, he's being strong. He's not creating conflict, he's standing up for what's right. This sense of entitlement acts like an impenetrable force field around his behaviors. Any suggestion that he might be overreacting or mishandling a situation bounces off this shield of self-righteousness. It's as if he's wearing an emotional armor welded shut by years of reinforcement, and the idea of taking it off feels like walking naked into battle. And of course, we never go into battle alone. The 5-year-old man has an entire platoon of equally immature comrades backing him up. This is where the band of brothers mentality becomes a major obstacle to growth. So for the men out there, try this. Next time you feel that familiar 5-year-old reaction bubbling up, take a breath. Remember, you're not that little boy anymore. You have adult skills and perspectives. You can choose how to respond. And ladies, next time your man goes full kindergarten on you, take a breath too. Remember, you're not dealing with a 40-year-old throwing a fit. You're dealing with a scared little boy in a 40-year-old body. A little patience and understanding can go a long way. The goal isn't to get rid of the inner 5-year-old. He's part of who we are, and he's got some great qualities too, like curiosity, playfulness, and enthusiasm. Unless this has become really pathological, in which case, we're talking about a closed mind that has become rigid and toxic. So here's to growing up, even if it happens 30 years after we thought we already did. And remember, the next time you see a grown man pouting like a preschooler, don't just roll your eyes. Smile and think, ah, the 5-year-old man strikes again. Who knows, with a little awareness and a lot of patience, we might just be able to evolve past the sandbox. And so, as we close the chapter on the 5-year-old man, with all his tantrums, competitiveness, and emotional armor, we can't help but wonder, what happens when this overgrown boy meets his match in the 3-year-old woman? Stay tuned, because that's a playground showdown you won't want to miss. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and share. See you in the next video.